Hello and welcome everybody to the second part, or part 2, of Our Life, Beginnings and Always. I have a happy little kitty in my lap, and we are going to be moving on to step 2. So here we go. Yes. I'll never get tired of that view. You stood beside your mom's and Lizzie's. The four of you watched the sun dip into the ocean somewhere far, far away. You like to imagine it cooling off in the water, resting itself before getting ready to shine brightly again tomorrow. That was a fun day. I didn't know they had magicians in the shopping street now. Neither did I! Oh no, you're so dull. Let's get out more. We didn't do real magic, Mom. How did you figure that one out?
Duh.
'Cause I know that's not what real magic looks like. Oh, Lizzie dear, there's all kinds of magic in the world. Lizzie gave Mommy a suspicious look, but didn't dispute the claim. Well, we can't sit out here all night. Time to hurry home and get cooking. Who's helping with dinner? Lizzie immediately let out a groan.
Ugh.
Mom, summer's almost over. The protest was obvious. You could practically see school on the horizon. You certainly didn't want to spend your last bits of freedom cooking dinner. You could do that any other day. It is almost over. You tried to be subtle about your little mumble, but you saw Mom look down at you from the corner of her eye and knew she heard. Yeah, it would be evil not to let us play until dinner. You weren't sure evil was a fair word choice, but nodded anyway. At times like this, you had to back each other up.
Please.
Soon we'll have homework and reading to do. You can't do work now too. We can't do work now too. Lizzie made her case and then stomped her foot into the ground. You mimicked her, feeling that would add something to the argument. Well...
No.
Oh, come on, Pam. I can help you with dinner. Mommy leaned in for a hug, and you knew that you were very close to victory.
Okay.
All right. But as soon as dinner's ready, you lot are coming inside, understood? Yes, Mom. Yes, Mom. Ah, so much to do, so little time. Maybe I could still get the seashell bracelet at Tines and Trinkets. Oh, or maybe the playground, or the fireflies would probably be coming out, right? Don't I get a say in this? Lizzie looked over at you, narrowing her eyes like she was very seriously contemplating the answer to that question. As a strong gust of wind made you shiver, Lizzie huffed as she wrapped her arms around herself.
Rude.
Doesn't the wind know that summer's not over yet? That's all Lizzie said before abruptly turning on her heel and heading off in the direction your mothers had gone. Where are you going? I'm going to my room. I have lots to plan if I want to make the most of tomorrow. You thought this over, looking off towards the water again. Lizzie didn't wait, and before long she was disappearing off down the road. You stayed outside. You watched Lizzie run off, twisting your lips as you considered what to do. In the end, the pretty sky and the soothing sound of the waves won out. You strayed off the path, grinning at the feel of sand quickly filling in the empty space in your flip-flops. That was fun for a while, but you grew bored eventually. How else could you enjoy the remainder of your time at the beach? Let's add to our collection. You walked to the shoreline, peering at any debris that washed up. Most of it was just seaweed, rocks, and trash, though now and then you spotted a seashell. You picked up the ones that stood out to you until you had a nice little collection. It was a great evening, but soon enough you had your fill and were ready to join the rest of your family back home. Not too much further down, you spotted a familiar green head of hair moseying along the shore. I don't remember this choice. We've been through a lot. Curious, you strayed off your path and walked over to him. Cove knelt down, picking up something you quickly identified as a smooth rock. He reared his arm back, then tossed it out into the water. It was a good toss. That was pretty neat. What are you doing? Cove jumped a little and you let out a small giggle. Sorry. What are you doing out here? I asked first. Cove frowned, turning back to the waves. I'm not doing anything, just thinking. Cove was looking down at his cast, scratching idly at the pink surface, even though you were pretty sure he couldn't feel it. His brows were furrowed, and there was a frown on his face.
It's not fair.
Oh.
It's not fair.
Whoever voiced Cove or did these little lines, good job. That's not fair. I've had to wear this cast for ages. I can't even swim. How'd you get it? I was jet skiing. That's not fair. Cool. Really? Cove narrowed his eyes a little. Yeah, why would I lie? You dropped your eyes from his, fidgeting. You didn't think he was lying. You were just surprised. He then continued to explain. I crashed. He gestured to his arm as if to say, and this was the result. It's hard to believe you're allowed to jet ski.
Whoa.
Well, I'm not. Oh. Cove let out a huff, plopping down into the sand. I can't believe summer's almost over. He sat down next to him and nodded in agreement, regardless of the sudden topic change. I don't want to go to school. I mean, I would. I don't want to go to a new school. I think it'll be the same school as you and Lizzie. My dad said something about that. So, why don't you want to go? It's nice as far as schools go. You'd only ever been to one school, but you were sure that his old school couldn't have been that much better. Then again, he did have to make new friends and meet new teachers. It could be kind of scary. Cove shook his head and then wrapped his good arm around his knees as he drew them to his chest. You heard a sniffling sound, and when you took a good look at his face, you realized that his eyes were wet.
I want to go home.
You weren't sure what to do. It felt weird to just leave him here, crying, but what could you say that would help? I have a playful kitty on my lap who wants to attack my hands. Hey! You can only be on my lap if you behave. He frowned a little, starting to stand. Okay, well, bye then. Cove gave his head a small shake. No, I want to go back home. Right. Cove wanted to go back to his old home. The one that sat waiting someplace far from here. The one he would bring up whenever he felt this sad. It had been a while since he had moved in, but he didn't seem to feel any better about being here. He settled back down into the sand, trying to consider what to do. Do you hate it here? Cove's brow furrowed even more. Then he shook his head. You're not going to leave, right? You'll still be around. The question was a little surprising. Of course. Your parents would have mentioned if you were going to move or something, right? After a second, Cove gave a little nod. Once I get my cast off, we could go swimming. You were fine with him changing the subject again. Okay. You had to say swimming did sound fun, even if it was already getting chilly out. Cove smiled, then looked back to the waves. My dad keeps saying I'll get used to everything, eventually. That I'd feel better then. It used to make me angry. I didn't want to get used to everything. You spared a glance over at Cove and saw the anger had slipped off his face in favor of something almost puzzled. But maybe that would be okay after all. As long as I really do feel better. I can't see it. The two of you sat quietly, just taking in the sounds of the waves. Lost in thought, you started a bit when you heard a faint, familiar sound. The sound of your mom shouting your name. You looked over your shoulder, realizing You looked over your shoulder, realizing it was probably time for dinner. Had you guys really been sitting out here that long? You stood and dusted the sand off of yourself. My mom's calling. It's time for dinner. You should come. Cove looked up at you, expression screaming reluctance, yet ultimately, okay. When you smiled, Cove returned with one of his own. But the two of you couldn't stay there on your own little world any longer. You were being called forward. So the both of you ran off towards your house, leaving the waves and the summer behind. Alright, this is the portion where we get to change anything that we want. Like hairstyle and... heck, we can even change our... We can't change your last name. We can't change your first name, but we can't change our last name. Oh well. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. Alright, I didn't change a whole lot. We got slightly new hairdo, some earrings, and new glasses, and more freckles. So we're gonna say done. Now we get to decide what our comfort and interest levels are again. So we're gonna go for nervous still, but we're gonna go fond. So we've moved up from indifferent. We are now fond of our special friend Cove Holden. Yes. Now, you can customize Cove, but I'm not going to this time. So whatever he ends up with is whatever we've got. So let's go ahead and see what that is. August ended, September began. It was time to go back to school. Lizzie groaned and complained the entire first week. She hated going to classes. Still, there were interesting things to do that couldn't be done anywhere else. You weren't sure how Cove felt about it. He was enrolled that year. That was like a sign Cove would be staying in Sunsetburg for a while. At school, he was alright, but kept his distance from the other kids. From what you saw, anyway. Originally, he treated you like everyone else, passing by as if you didn't know each other. But as the years went on, the two of you acknowledged each other more and more. A friendship had started to grow. That year, the divorce of Cove's parents was finalized. You overheard your parents talking about it, saying Cove's dad got full custody. At first, you were worried that meant bad news. It made Mr. Holden cry, apparently. Then you found out it meant Cove would keep living with his dad. He would only stay with his mom a few weeks of the year. Cove cried too, for different reasons, you thought. It seemed like Cove and his dad might move again, but Mr. Holden decided to stay after all. Mom asked him about it once. He had said he didn't want to uproot Cove's life a second time. Mr. Holden tried to get Cove to like Sunsetburg more. He kept encouraging his son to go out and see the place. Sometimes Mr. Holden volunteered you to spend time with Cove. You weren't sure how well it worked in changing Cove's thoughts on the town, yet it might have been part of the reason you and Cove ended up growing closer. Cove never talked to anyone about what happened with his parents, and withdrew whenever it was brought up. It was hard for him, yet nobody knew how to help. Eventually, Cove stopped crying on his own. You couldn't understand what had changed. Still, you worried about him. You could tell he wasn't completely happy. Maybe one day he could say out loud what he felt inside. After that, it felt like things had gone back to normal, except that what was normal didn't stay the same. Years passed and suddenly you were in middle school. You weren't a kid anymore. You were 13 years old. That officially made you a teen, even if your sister didn't agree. The toys and crowns that used to litter every free space in your room had been packed away somewhere, replaced by new hobbies. There were other changes too. Cove's cast got taken off. It was weird to see him without it initially. Underneath the pink plaster ended up being a long, thin scar that snaked across his forearm. Cove's chest puffed out in pride when someone drew attention to it. He also went through a major growth spurt. He was the tallest student in his class. For 2 years in a row. Cove will probably hold that spot again next time. In class, people knew him for more than just being tall. He also stood out because of how well he did with school stuff overall. Over the years, he began opening up more too. You saw him talking amicably with other kids or neighbors from time to time. And the only kid that came to visit the neighborhood when you were little, Shiloh, well, he was gone. He and his mom moved back south because of their work, just 1 year after Cove came to Sunsetburg. It had been really upsetting when he left. Lizzie was inconsolable for weeks, but nobody talked about Shiloh anymore. It was a long time ago. You learned some heartbreaking things became less sad the further away they were, even if they had never gotten any better. That was sad in its own way. Things at home were different too. You still lived in the same house and all that, but it wasn't how it was before. Ma dyed her hair purple, wanting something new, and liked it so much she kept dyeing it. You remember calling her Mommy as a kid, but something like that seemed awkward nowadays. You were much too old for that word. Lizzie felt too mature for her nickname, too. She insisted on everyone calling her Elizabeth. So you did. Your mom soon gave her permission to go places other than the playground and shopping street, which she took advantage of. You rarely saw her around the old neighborhood. In fact, she hardly spent time with you the way she did before. Elizabeth instead associated more and more with girls from school who were her own age. Maybe the difference between 13 and 15 was greater than the difference between 8 and 10. You started befriending new people yourself, like Derek Cerez. He didn't live in the neighborhood or go to the same school. What happened was his and Cove's dad struck up a business partnership a few months ago. Since then, Derek would pop up in the area now and then. It seemed Mr. Schwartz was happy to let Derek tag along to his work, if Derek had the time for it. Without a doubt, everyone and everything around you had changed, in small and big ways. You had too. As time went by... Hello, kitten. Hello. As time went by, though, it was easy to settle into this new normal. Then, before you knew it, school was over and summer vacation had come again. You gonna settle back on my lap after you ditched it? Yeah. I have a bad habit of digging your claws into my leg. It was the first day of summer vacation. The sun was as hot as ever, but you were inside and away from its harsh rays. To be more specific, you were... I'm actually going to be wide awake this time. I think I usually sleep in. Wide awake, about to head out to enjoy your time off. You made sure to slather on a generous amount of sunscreen so you didn't get burnt. You were looking in the mirror, studying the clothes you'd thrown on, when your bedroom door opened without warning. In the reflection, you saw Elizabeth raise an eyebrow. Have you been staring at yourself this whole morning? Good morning, Elizabeth. She ignored that, crossing her arms over her chest with a disgruntled expression. Clearly, she hadn't come in just to see you. Mom told me to tell you that your friend's at the door. He brought some happy summer gift from Mr. Holden. Mom wants you to take it from him and say thanks or whatever.
Come on.
So come down already. Gosh. Really? That's great. I'm coming. Elizabeth said nothing else and left, having done what was instructed of her. Now alone, you focused on the mirror once again. I guess I'm average height, so I'll go average height. Cove was really tall. Derek was kind of short, and you were pretty much the exact height that someone would expect for a 13-year-old. How tall was I when I was 13? I used to be really self-conscious about how short I was. But I think I've kind of... I mean, being short still has its challenges, but I've kind of gotten over it. At least I don't have to duck to get into the door. Then you put the finishing touches on your outfit while ruminating on the situation. Careless as they had been, Elizabeth's words piqued your curiosity. You planned on going over to see what Cove was up to, so this worked in your favor. Your reflection grinned back at you. You were looking forward to seeing him. You left your room, resting a hand on the railing as you went down the stairs. Step 2. Second chance. You spotted Mom first, reclining on the couch. She held a magazine in her hands, which she was perusing through. Morning, Mom. She looked at the eager greeting, a smile instantly appearing on her face.
Thanks.
You know, I have to admit, the characters are really nice looking. They are really pretty. Good morning, Eclair. Thank you for coming down. Ma's at the door with Cove. He can't stay over today, unfortunately. Why don't you go and thank him before he leaves? You nodded and made your way to the front of the house. Just as she said, Mom was there making conversation. She must have heard you because she looked over her shoulder. Oh? Look who finally made it. Morning, sleepyhead. Ma reached forward and you knew she was about to pat you on the head. She was taller than average, so you were little in her eyes, despite being a typical size for your own age. You let her do it. You stood by patiently and indulged your mom's wishes. She gave you 2 small taps on the crown of your head. Ah, you're the last one down today. You know that? Uh-huh. Life isn't a race.
Funny.
I didn't think that excuse will work if you're late for anyone other than your own mother, though. With a small laugh, Ma stepped aside. Cove was just as you remembered, exactly how you came to know him to be. He leaned uncomfortably to the side in your doorway as the longer strands of his hair idly drifted with the breeze. His features were pinched in embracement, and he shifted from one foot to another. He was holding what must have been the much-talked-about gift. At first glance, you figured it must be a bouquet of flowers. Then you gave it a real look. No, instead it was carefully cut fruit. It made a lot of sense that it was actually from Cove's dad. You had to suppress a laugh at this showing. You couldn't imagine many folks buying this sort of thing for their own personal enjoyment. That kind of arrangement was built for the presentation, likely to impress whoever was inevitably going to receive it. It seemed no matter how long he lived here, Mr. Holden would keep going out of his way to be neighborly, and Cove would always be roped into participating. Cove smiled slightly at the sight of you. The sting of this goofy errand he was clearly embraced to be on erased. Hey, Claire. You earnestly grinned back. It wasn't weird at all, like it used to be when you were kids. As time passed, the two of you started to enjoy each other's company. Now you actually considered him a good friend, and not someone you were forced to be around by your families. Hey, it's real nice to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you too. And you were certain he meant that agreement. It was already shaping up to be another long summer, with plenty of time for the two of you to have fun together. His awkwardness over the task started to creep back in, so Cove nudged the gift closer to you. He was ready to be relieved of it. And with that, the gift was accepted. I hope you and your family like this. It's a pretty good gift. I think so anyways. He smiled earnestly. Dad spent a lot of time picking out the best size and design. There are so many options to choose from. Thank you. To you and Mr. Holden. I'll tell him you said that. Mr. Holden's behavior really was different from any neighbor you'd ever had. Though after 5 years you were used to his antics, and you'd since made up your mind on what your opinion was. He was great. Though there were some things people didn't like about Mr. Holden, you didn't mind them and liked him quite a bit. Your thoughts were quickly interrupted by a shout. There you are! You shared a confused look with Cove. As one, both of you stepped through the open door and into the neighborhood street. It didn't take long to locate the source of the noise. You spotted Derek, just a few yards down the road. He ran up to you. You hadn't expected to see Derek today, though you never really knew when he'd appear. After stopping a couple steps away, Derek hunched over to catch his breath. Then he looked up with a wide grin.
Hey.
Hey, Guy and pal. I was just at your house, Cove, but no one was there. Hey. 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 Should have figured you'd be at Claire's place. Do you ever spend time in your own home, or are you always just there? Derek laughed at his own joke. He either didn't notice that it embraced Cove, or the embracement was what he was actually laughing at. Derek turned to you. He was going to say more when his eyes widened and he gasped. What's that? You followed his gaze, unsure. Then you realized what he meant. You were still holding Mr. Holden's gift. It's kind of like a bouquet of flowers, but made out of fruit. Nice! Can I have some? It's a gift from my family. Maybe you can have some later. Derek grew more excited by your words, bouncing at the balls of his feet. Awesome! Then you nodded his head as if to clear it. Anyway, that's right. I came here because I needed to say something big. He paused, possibly for effect. There's some other kid here in Sunsetford. Cove was as surprised as you were by the news. Such a reaction made sense. No one around your age had moved here since Cove did 5 years ago. Were they with their family? Maybe they were cutting through. Nuh-uh, the new kid was all by himself, just walking. Did you talk to him?
Nope.
I came to report the sighting right away. The kid had green hair, glasses, was pretty small, and seemed really upset about something. I hope he didn't leave. You blinked. Slowly. You looked over to your longtime neighbor. That sounds a lot like you, Cove. When you first got here, anyway. It kinda does, doesn't it? That's weird. He sounded almost fond, a small smile playing on his lips. Derek snickered good-naturedly. I can see that really well, now that you say so. But what'd you say? Let's go find Cove's look-alike. We should all meet him.
Sure.
I'll do it. Sure, I want to see who this person is. Derek grinned. Then he pointed down the street the way he came. Last I saw him, the mystery visitor was going this direction. Nothing else needed to be said. The three of you were off with Derek leading the way. Don't even bother to go back inside. Okay. Derek brought you to the beach, and as a trio you made your way down the shore to the old playground. You walked a familiar path in a comfortable silence. When you were almost there, you spotted the kid in question. His bright color almost shone like a beacon beneath the rays of the sun. He scuffled around, kicking up the sand as he paced. It was true, he certainly seemed upset, but you didn't think he was sad, like you had originally pictured. No, with his erratic movements and scrunched-up expression, he came off angry. You became uncomfortable at the idea of talking to the stranger now. You didn't want to bother him if he was in such a bad mood. Derek didn't feel the same. He waved wildly, calling out to the boy. Hey, guy, over here! The kid whipped around, an impressive scowl carving deeper into his face. His eyes were tired, but a strong hostile energy still radiated from him.
What?
What is it? What do you want? The sharp tone made Derek flinch. He shifted on his feet. What's your name? Jeremy. Was that it?
No.
I'm Derek. That's Eclair and Cove. We were just walking around and saw you. We wanted to say hi. There aren't a lot of kids our age in the neighborhood. Yeah, so, it's cool to see someone else here. Strangely, Jeremy grew more furious by your response. If steam could erupt from a person's ears, it would have happened then. They did bring me somewhere stupid. Of course, I knew it. Get ready for a roller coaster, y'all. What?
My parents.
They're the ones who brought me. I didn't walk to this town. Can you not figure that out on your own?
Right.
My dad brings me to Sunset Bird too, when he has to come for work and all that stuff. It's not bad. That earned him a glare from Jeremy. Derek winced beneath it, glancing away. It was a struggle to remain friendly with this Jeremy guy. I mean, I wouldn't want to come here for a real vacation, probably, either. That's an understatement. This doesn't count as a vacation. It's a waste of time. A chore. My parents' family is nearby, and we just had to come see them. Ugh. If they're your parents' family, doesn't that make them your family too?
I guess.
That's a pretty good reason to come by. Did you want to go somewhere else? No! Jeremy crossed his arms with a huff. He turned away. They should have gone by themselves since they cared so much, and left me home, but I'm not allowed to be by myself. Yeah, what are you, like 13? Makes no sense. They're the ones who don't know how to do anything, and I'm the kid. Calm down, you don't have to yell so much. I've used that one before, it was funny. You shouldn't talk about your parents like that. What do you know about my parents? Have you met them? No. Some parents are criminals, but I guess us brainless children have to be nice. Being rude to a parent is the worst thing in the world. That's not what I meant.
So dumb.
Close enough. You be their kid. I'll take your mom and dad. Only someone with really easy parents would be dumb enough to say something so stupid. Oh, look. Kid. Hey! Eclair is not dumb. I'm smarter than you are. Oh, this is interesting. I haven't had this one before. Wow. Smarter than you are. My parents are great and you can't have them. I have 2 moms. Shut up. Stop it. My parents are great and you can't have them. I knew it. So obvious. He turned to Cove, lowering your voice. 2 of you aren't that similar after all. Jeremy must have had good hearing, though, because he caught the private exchange and scoffed.
Stupid.
Of course we're not similar. My eyebrows aren't stupid. Coast's cheeks flushed crimson at the insult. You couldn't be sure if it was out of embracement or anger. Maybe both. Come on. How can you say that when you have a bowl cut? What? That was all you could say. What? What? Look at them. I don't have to explain. Cove gave you a watery look in exchange for the silent support. Trying to talk to the rude boy clearly wasn't going to go anywhere. Wow, what is wrong with you? Instead of taking offense, Jeremy only parroted Derek's words in a nasally voice.
Wow, what is wrong with you?
Wah wah. This is dumb. Jeremy stuck out his tongue and skulked away, throwing more sand everywhere as he went. You watched him go, hunched over until he became a speck in your vision. Silence reigned in his wake. The three of you tried to process what just happened. I can't believe it. What a mean kid. Derek wasn't kidding, and by the sound of those earlier complaints, the new boy Jeremy was going to be in the area for at least a little while this summer. Ugh. Derek sighed in dismay. Plopping into the ground, he followed, and Cove did too shortly after. There wasn't much else to do.
This sucks.
I was hoping we could meet someone fun, hang out maybe. He shook his head after a moment, and he slowly turned to you with a hopeful expression. But, you know what would really improve the day? What? He didn't respond. Instead, he used a hand to point, right at the fruit arrangement that you were still holding. You'd completely forgotten about it during the mini-drama that unfolded. You had gotten used to the wait. Glancing over to Cove, you noticed he was eyeing the fruit. He must want some too. I need to save it.
Okay.
Oh, Derek. He sagged, still staring at the glistening fruit, but he didn't insist further. Yeah, it's a gift for the Swedish family, after all. They should be the ones to get to have it. Sorry for asking. It's fine. Quiet once more descended upon your group. Cove turned towards the ocean, a peaceful expression on his face. Hey, you two remember the land before time? That fruit thing makes me think of it. The dinosaurs all liked the leaves that were shaped like stars. Tree stars!
Yeah.
Chomping leaves looked so delicious when they did it. Eating leaves looks good. Should I worry about you? He snickered. No, I'm not gonna do it for real, but I did pretend I was a long neck when I ate broccoli one time. Derek didn't say anything further about dinosaurs or otherwise. For the next few minutes, the three of you watched the waves crash into the shore. Hey, Claire? Yeah? The two of you met eyes casually. Forget it. Okay. Yeah. Derek leaned back in his arms. He contemplated the sky with a content sigh. So, are you both ready for summer break? I'm not sure. I get it. Feels like there's a lot to plan for, doesn't it? And what about you, Cove? Are you ready? I think that depends. Before you could say anything else, the light atmosphere was shattered.
Hey!
Eclair! You glanced over your shoulder to see your sister. She strode closer and closer, appearing none too pleased. I've been looking all over for you. Ma said you and Cove ran off with the thing Mr. Holden brought for us. She leered over you with arms folded. So, where is it? It's fine, and right here. You turned your body to face her and held up the bouquet, proving that it was in one piece. She inspected the fruit arrangement with a small frown.
Okay.
Alright, looks good, but if all you're doing is sitting around, you better take it back to the house now. It's not just for you. She grinned, glancing at Cove, who sat beside you. Even if you do have an in with the delivery boy, this was up to Mr. Holden. Cove stifled a chuckle and gave you a spiritual look. Get going. This wasn't okay just because you hadn't done anything yet. Oh no, I think I hear the mean kid coming back. We better get out of here. Elizabeth blinked, confused, and looked around.
What?
What kid? I don't see anyone. Derek didn't bother explaining. He just launched to his feet and ran off. Cove hopped up too, gladly taking the opportunity to exit the situation. He followed after Derek, but he sent a look to you from over his shoulder. He returned to watch Elizabeth. She stared back, brow raised. Do I run or do I stay? I still have the gift. I should probably take that home. I'll stay. You didn't make a break for it. Instead, you carefully got out from the stand, bouquet still in hand. Once you straightened up, Elizabeth smiled affectionately over at you.
Come on.
Come on, fugitive. You nodded, then examined the fruit skewers. You wanted to make sure it hadn't been jostled by the short adventure you'd gone on. It still looked great, Elizabeth noticed too. You know, we could split it now and tell them those boys edit. They bailed, so they don't get to tell the story. Moms would never need to find out. You said it wasn't just for me, remember? Now you're doing the same thing. She bumped your shoulder, winking cheekily. What else is family for? You laughed together, making your way home side by side. Later that night, you found yourself seated near the kitchen counter. You and Elizabeth didn't follow through with the joke to eat everything before getting home. When the two of you returned, your moms welcomed you back. There wasn't a mention of the mini-event that had unfolded. The four of you happily split the bouquet after dinner in the end. That was a while ago now. Your fingers drummed on the surface as you waited, your gaze trained on the phone. You were waiting on a call tonight, specifically from your cousin, Leandra. You didn't want to miss it accidentally. Your uncle, aunt, and Lee used to live many hours away. Your families only saw each other a few times a year for big occasions. A while back, though, they'd moved and were closer to you than ever before and now hung out regularly. With school being out, you're positive she's gonna want to come over a lot. The two of you were the same age and got along well. She used to be really fond of Lizzie, Elizabeth, too, but now that your sister had become allergic to interacting with her own family, it tended to be just you and Lee who spent time together. Being family helped make you close, but you had a lot of girlfriends. You often gravitated towards other girls and befriended them pretty easily. You also had a lot of non-girlfriends. What kind of gender someone was didn't seem to make any difference in who you got along with. Then the shrill ringtone announced an incoming call. You jumped before grabbing the receiver and pressing it to your ear. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Claire. It's Lee. I'm glad it's you. For a second there, I thought it might be one of Elizabeth's friends. There was static on the end, as if Lee was shifting wherever she was. So, can you believe school's actually over? I thought it would never be done. Now we don't have to do any of that boring stuff, and we get to hang out whenever we want. Speaking of hanging out, Lee, can you wait a second? Let me just head to my room.
Oh, yeah.
You got up from your seat at the counter. Luckily, the phone was wireless, so you didn't have to worry about any cords tying you down. Your mom's had a rule about not moving the phone unless a call was in progress, which was why you'd been sat by its cradle waiting for Lee to call. You thought that made sense. It was nice to keep everything in its proper place. But now that Lee had called, it was okay for you to go upstairs to your bedroom and talk to her. You made your way up the stairs, smiling. After you had arrived, you shut the bedroom door firmly behind you. You took a seat on your bed. All right, I'm here.
Cool.
Hey, did you know the girl down the street from me has her own phone now? A cell phone. She doesn't have to wait for someone else to stop using it or anything. Wow, really? The thought of someone having a phone that was all their own seemed unbelievable to you. Right? I wish I had one too, but my parents said I couldn't get my own phone until I'm more grown up. I wish they'd change their mind. We could call each other every single day and no one would be able to stop us. How great would that be? But I wouldn't. I still be using But wouldn't I still be using the home phone? My moms would be able to stop us if they wanted. Lee laughed. You didn't put a damper on her imagination. Oh, then you have your own phone too. That works. She sighed dramatically. I bet I'm not going to get one until I'm all the way in college. Squeezing the phone between your shoulder and ear, you puffed up your pillows and made yourself more comfy. It was strange to think of a time when normal school would be over and you'd have to choose whether or not to go to a college. School was such a big part of your life right now. You worked about as hard as most people and got pretty average results as well. You guessed that was a reasonable enough. You felt a lot of pressure to get higher grades than you did last year. Your future depended on it. Yeah. You tried to sound engaged, but your mind had decided to go back to school despite the season. Lee knew you too well to be fooled.
What's up?
You sound so spacey. What's up? Just thinking about school? Lee groaned. Are you thinking about how we don't have to think about it because it's summer? That's what I'm doing. Come on, it's too scary not to think about. No matter how much you wanted to enjoy your free time, the creeping dread of knowing that it would come to an end was always there beside you. I get what you mean, though I guess school isn't all the way bad. You can do some good things there. You can just do more when school's out. Learning new things can be cool. I just wish everyone did okay with how they taught the things, not just some people.
Me too.
It's the easiest way to hang out with people not in the neighborhood. If I didn't go to school, I'd never meet anybody new. No one really comes here. Uh-huh. That's all. And that's pretty much everything that's good about school. Okay, point taken.
All right.
Now I decree the topic of school is officially closed. We have to talk about the summer first before we start plotting the rest of our lives. I've got some plans already. Like? I'm gonna visit my cousins. You chuckled. Of course. What's something you want to do? The first thing that comes to your head. Probably will spend some time at the beach. I don't want to do anything at all. It's a vacation. Lee giggled. Aiming high, huh? Don't strain yourself. You leaned back on your bed, settling in as you continued chatting with your friend. Even though it hadn't been that long since you saw her and you'd be seeing her soon, you found plenty to talk about. For one, the events of the day. You sat up straighter. I was with Cove and Derek today, and we met a new kid. Like, at your neighborhood? His parents were visiting family, so it sounds like he'll be around for a little while. I don't know how long. What was he like? Mean. He kept snapping when all we were trying to do was talk to him. He just kept being rude to everyone, but especially Cove. It was awful. I don't think I want to meet him. You want a boy to stay away before even meeting him? That's an unexpected twist. Your cousin was pretty popular with the boys who knew her. She seemed happy enough to have them around until they started to annoy her. Who are you to talk? Who are you to talk? Cove and Derek are always around. They're both boys, you know. That is not to say. I'm not the one who invites them. They show up on their own. We laughed at your response, deeply amused. You shut your eyes tightly, feeling embraced by her reaction. There was a stomping noise approaching your room, heralding the arrival of your irritated older sister. She flung the door open, a frown etched on her face. The little adventure from earlier hadn't gotten you any goodwill this time, it seemed.
Come on.
How long are you going to hog the phone? Glancing at your watch, you realized that your quick call had gone on much longer than anticipated. Elizabeth held out her hand, the other one lodged in her hip. She noticed the realization on your face. Time's up. Sorry for being long. Lee, I have to go now.
Bye.
Okay, see you soon. Tell Elizabeth and your moms I said hi too. You'd barely pressed the end call button when Elizabeth whisked the handset from your fingers and began dialing someone new as she strode out of the room. Your mom's voice called from downstairs. Hey, has anyone seen the phone? I'm using it. With that, she shut your door behind you. Silence was left in the wake. That was one way to end your first day of summer break. Sometime later, it had gotten dark outside and you laid in bed, wide awake. Your window rattled all of a sudden, startling you badly. You flinched, staring over it with furrowed brows. From your vantage point, you saw only the moon and an open sky. You were curious. What had caused that noise? Cocking your head, you sat up and moved closer to the window. You wanted to get to the bottom of this. To your utter shock, your gaze was met by a pair of familiar ocean blue eyes. Cove? You squinted. Yep, Cove was right outside your window. Your house was very angular, and some parts stuck out further than others, so it theoretically wouldn't be hard to climb around on. Still, just because somebody could didn't mean you expected it to ever happen. To his credit, Cove was doing fine. His feet were braced against a section of the wall that jutted out, his arms flexing with the effort to keep him upright. He easily lifted a hand and waved at you from the other side of the glass. You hurriedly opened the window. Cove climbed over the ledge, releasing your breath once he was safely inside. Hi, Eclair. What are you doing? This sure is a surprise, but you're always welcome. What are you doing? Visiting? Why? I needed to talk to you and couldn't wait until tomorrow. If I rang the doorbell, I know your moms would have answered and they'd just make me go home. I didn't really want to explain why I was coming over anyway. I don't want to talk about it. Well, besides with you, I mean, but that's why I did that. As unexpected as this was, you were touched. Cove felt like he could tell you what was wrong. I might have tried calling or something, except my dad was on the phone. Cove suddenly looked very cross. Dad, he was talking to my mom. Still is, probably. You raised your eyebrows. Cove had eavesdropped on his parents' phone conversation? You didn't comment on him eavesdropping. There were other things to talk about. Are you going to stay with your mom for a while again? Every year, Cove was sent off to live with his mom for a few weeks. When it happened varied. Sometimes he would go during winter break, but usually he went during summer. Even though it was hard news when you found out he was leaving, and you missed seeing him those weeks, you understood. To your surprise, however, he shook his head. That's what I thought too, but no, that's not what they were saying. My dad asked my mom not to have me leave this year. He said she could come stay with us here. He waited for him to continue. He didn't. The conversation abruptly dropped off. You couldn't help but stare at Cove. There was a complicated mix of expressions on his face. Did she say what she would do? She told him she'd come. I know she's coming soon, before school starts. Oh. You had heard Cove talk about his mom a lot over the years. He'd tell you about past memories or what happened while he was visiting her. Still, it was one thing to hear about someone and another to actually meet them. Very soon, you were going to see Cove's mom in person. You were taken back by the news, so you could only imagine how Cove felt. You looked over at him. He was pacing across your room, his features pained with dread. Before, they'd barely stand in the same room long enough to have lunch. Now we're going to be all together again, the three of us after all this time, just for a few weeks? I know I should probably be happy. They can talk to each other now. I'm still not. I'm just confused and freaked out, and now I feel really bad for feeling this way. Eclair, it's so... His fists tightened and his eyes became misty. I shouldn't keep getting like this. It's been a long time already, and I'm not a little kid. Though he wouldn't meet your eyes, you knew he was waiting for you to say something. I'm sorry, Cove. You know I'm here for you. The tense line of Cove's shoulders eased. Thanks, that makes me feel a little better, like I'm not freaking out for no reason. A momentary silence fell over the two of you. You marveled at how the day started. You had woken up eager for summer vacation, but now things seemed so crazy. The mini debacle with Mr. Holden's gift, the newest addition to the neighborhood being so rude, and as if all that wasn't enough, now Cove's mom would be living with Cove and his dad again. Your whole life was kind of like that, and it seemed complicated and hard and different. Why couldn't things just get better with time? Eclair? The sound of your name, said quietly, pulled you from your thoughts. Cove gazed at you, concerned.
Are you okay? Are you okay?
Sweet muffin. Wow, who, me? I'm more worried about you. You don't have to forget about yourself for me. I want to listen to you too. Cove grinned reassuringly. It was small and delicate, but you knew it was genuine. He had come here, conflicted and upset, only to end up worrying about you. He really was a great friend. You know, I think I don't want to talk anymore about this. He looked away, his lips thinning into a line and rubbing at his arms. But I kind of don't want to go back home either. Could I stay a little longer, just doing something else? He appeared equal parts hopeful and vulnerable. How could you possibly turn him away? Of course, you can always stay for Cove. I've got a flashlight and some cards. You in? That's the one I normally do. Of course, you can always stay for Cove. You smiled shyly. Your voice was tentative as his was, but you meant what you said. Cove perked up at your response, a smile appearing on his face. He immediately took a seat on your bed, not afraid to get comfortable in your room. You felt a little better at the sight somehow. You still had a lot of worries, but you were glad he was here. And not just tonight. You were glad he came into your life in the first place. That was a change you'd never want to undo. Who would have thought Cove would mean so much to you? You certainly hadn't in the beginning. You had kept your distance, and so had he. Now you considered him to be one of your closest friends. You joined Cove on your bed, taking a seat across from him. He smiled at you again, but you could tell this time it was half-hearted. He was still easy to read. Though he didn't want to talk about his mom and dad, he must be thinking about what happened and what's about to happen. You smiled gently at him. You had no idea how to make him feel better, though you wanted to try anyway. Hopefully your presence was helping. Conversation was stilted and broken often by silence at first. Then both of you were able to get into your usual candor. As your secret hangout session stretched on, you thought that you truly wanted to keep having moments like this with him. You hoped a day would never come when life decided that the two of you would have to part ways, and you knew Cove felt the same way. You opened your tired eyes, groaning as they adjusted to the bright light that was streaming through your window and warming your olive skin. With a loud yawn, you rolled away from the sunlight and blinked a couple of times, clearing the sleep from your eyes before realizing with a start that it was actually morning. You couldn't remember even falling asleep. Cove had crept through your window during the night, and the two of you had spent time together, trying not to wake up your parents. You must have fallen asleep while you were hanging out, but couldn't put a finger on exactly when. You wonder how late Cove had stayed before heading home. You rubbed your face and yawned again, contemplating whether you should get out of bed and get ready for the day, or stay snuggled up for a little while longer, until your gaze landed on an instantly recognizable mop of pale green hair, and you bolted upright, gasped in surprise. He never left! He was still there! In the morning! Cove! He had fallen asleep while sitting on the ground and precariously leaning his head on the side of your mattress. With your shout, Cove's eyes snapped open and his head slipped from its source of support. He didn't stop going down until he smacked right into the floor with a crack. You clamped a hand over your mouth and looked down at him with wide eyes, curled up where he had landed rather ungracefully. Are you okay? He winced at his tumble, hoping no one else in the house had heard either of your outbursts. Yeah, I'm alright. Cove rubbed at his forehead a little, and you weren't sure that was entirely true. If either of your moms found out Cove had slept here last night, the two of you would be in big trouble. Cove blinked at you a couple of times, his eyes growing in panic as some thought that only he could hear settled in his mind. I fell asleep! You weren't exactly sure what to do as you watched Cove pace your room, looking around frantically. Cove's hands flew to his face, letting out a sigh of relief when he found his glasses right where they were supposed to be. Despite that, he hadn't calmed down completely. The atmosphere was still frazzled. Oh, we're going to be in so much trouble. You could feel your throat growing tight and the air struggle to hit your lungs as you thought about all the possible punishments your parents might give you. Summer was just beginning. You couldn't imagine you have to stay cooped up in your house for the rest of it. That was just barbaric. Letting out a heavy sigh, he ran a hand through his hair in exasperation. He couldn't look at you again as he spoke. I'll see you later. You were confused by how all of this had played out, but hoped that was true. Bye. At that, he glanced at you once more. The expression was placid. In all the panic, he had stopped ever so briefly by a moment of clarity. Thanks again. You're a good friend, Claire. He firmly whispered the words so there was no room to doubt he meant it. But he turned away from you before you had a chance to respond, or even fully react. In a matter of seconds, he had climbed over your bed and opened a window. A cool breeze rolled off the ocean, fluttering through Cove's hair and filling your room with its salty scent. Cove fearlessly stepped out into the ledge. You wished him luck. Good luck, and please be careful. You gulped, thinking how far the fall would be if he were to miss a single step. You weren't sure if he heard you or not, but he kept going along, one foot in front of the other, with increasing speed until his form disappeared out of sight. You stuck your head out the window as far as it could go to try and keep watch. He walked the full length of the ledge before jumping down to the top of the garage, then lowering himself into the fence. From there, he finally dropped down to the ground. You grinned at the sight of his successful climb. He ran off towards his house without stopping, disappearing behind the side of another building. You had to admit that you were pretty impressed at how doable he made that look. With a little sigh, you reclosed your window, deciding there was nothing more you could do. You hopped off your bed and got ready to head downstairs for the day. Put on your slippers. You knew it was the summer, but your slippers were comfy and cozy and made you feel better whenever you wore them. You took the stairs, slowly attempting to mask your face into a look of innocence. You were sure that someone would have come into your room if they had heard anything strange, but you couldn't be too careful. You had to play it cool. When you stepped into the living room, Elizabeth was there, tapping her finger on the counter. "Good morning, Elizabeth." She looked at you. She looked you over immediately, her eyes squinting at the greeting. Why are you being so weird? You hadn't even done anything. Your big sister never missed a beat, unfortunately. You stopped in your tracks, heart pounding in your chest, as you wondered if she could see the sweat that was building upon your temples. Eclair? Sorry? For what? I don't know. She began to smile, thinking whatever you were hiding was bigger than she assumed. Yes, you do. Tell me. Further suspicious squinting occurred as she waited for something. But ultimately she rolled her eyes and you weren't sure if you were in trouble or not. She didn't seem to care enough to dig any further. Whatever. And then she walked straight out the front door, letting it slam shut behind her, and you let out a brief sigh. Elizabeth went out most days to hang out with her friends from school around town. Today you were extra glad for it, though you were also grateful she hadn't left the house any sooner or risked running into Cove. It looked like you were getting away with it. Breakfast was eaten in peace and alone. Your moms were both out by the time you had gotten up. They had left you a serving of food from the breakfast they made. Hash browns, an omelet, fruit salad, or a few sausage links. You took a little bit of everything. It was tasty. You appreciated that there was a variety in the meals your moms made. The day lazily drifted by at home, and eventually your parents returned. You pulled open the fridge again, lingering in the frosty air for a moment or two before grabbing a bottle of ice-cold water and taking a long drink. It was perfect. Balmy summer afternoon, and you had decided to head outdoors and find something to do. You hadn't decided what that something was just yet, but you were sure something would pop up to occupy your time. As you were heading out the front door, you paused for a moment. You hadn't seen Cove since he had left that morning, and you couldn't help but think about what had happened to him. Would it be bad to go over to his house right now, or to call him to check in? You stepped out of your house, still stuck in an internal debate with yourself, when a voice caught your attention. Hi, Claire. Confused, you look over to where an unrecognizable woman was waving at you. A friendly smile plastered on her face. You racked your memory for where you might have seen her before, but nothing came to mind. Not your school, or from the country club your moms took you to. You had absolutely no idea who this woman was. The woman crossed the road towards you, and you were a little unsure whether you should stay put or go back into the house and lock the door. Oops, I'm sorry. Was that presumptuous? I've heard about you, but you have no idea who I am, do you? You shook your head, and she removed her sunglasses to reveal sparkling ocean blue eyes. All of a sudden, she seemed a little more familiar. My son lives here, and my ex, too. With a bent smile, she lifted a hand to point at the condo across the street from your own house. She was Cove's mom! You didn't know why you hadn't realized sooner, now that you'd gotten a good look at her. It made sense that she was Cove's mom. She felt so different to Cove. In the little time you'd been around her, she'd given off a totally different impression than Cove did. No matter your thoughts on her, you still felt taken back that she had appeared here so suddenly. Cove mentioned she was coming, but you hadn't gotten the impression it would be the very next day. She extended a hand again, this time for you to take, and you studied the manicured fingers in front of your face and the assortment of bracelets that dangled from her wrist. I'm Kira Priest. You can call me Kira. You shook her hand. You reached out and took her hand, and she shook yours firmly, grinning wide. You already know my name?
That I do.
Cove's mentioned you to me before. It's nice to officially meet you, Eclair. Cove talked to you about his mom. He hadn't mentioned how he said things about you to her. What are you doing here? I've come to visit this summer, to spend time with Cove and see the sights. They say this is a tourist town, right? The sound of a door opening and closing caught both your attention, and when you turned towards the sound, it was to find Cove exiting his house, his eyes skimming the ground. Considering just how tall he had grown, you kind of figured his mom also would have been tall, but she was much more on the short side for an adult anyway. Cove's height must have come from his father.
My baby.
There you are. I thought you were going to keep me standing out here all day. You tried to catch Cove's eyes as he walked towards you, but his gaze was firmly fixed on the sidewalk. When he finally crossed the road and looked up, he gave you a pitiful look. After the way he had acted last night, you knew he must be feeling pretty mixed up about this. You tried to wordlessly express that you understood. Cove and I are heading into town to grab something to eat while the snore is at work. Kira beamed at Cove and ruffled his hair, which only seemed to upset him more. You assumed the snore she was talking about was Mr. Holden. Hey, you should come with us, Eclair. I'd love to get to know you better. Yeah, you should come. There was a pleading in his tone that you couldn't miss. Of course, we'll run it by your parents first. Responsibility and all that. Any Heezies. It'll give me an excuse to meet them, which I need to do at some point. It's important to be neighborly if I'm going to be roosting in this street for the time being. Any Hoosies, let's go. Kira walked ahead towards your house, and you hung back with Cove, who crinkled his nose as he watched her.
Sorry.
I'm sorry about her, but I really do want you to come. I don't want it to be just the two of us. Not right now. You leaned in closer and whispered while checking around for anyone who might hear. What happened? Did your dad know you were gone? Cove shook his head and sighed heavily. Dad was so focused on Mom showing up that he didn't even notice. I thought when I heard them on the phone last night that it was something they were planning for the future. This morning Dad said it was supposed to be a surprise, and I guess I was surprised. She's gonna be here all summer. Oh. You were surprised to hear that too. Cove sighed again, even heavier. I'll go with you, if you really want me to. He smiled, his shoulders relaxing a little in relief. Thanks. That'd be cool. The two of you headed over to where Cove's mom had just knocked on your front door and stood behind her. Mom entered the door after a minute, her eyebrows lifting in surprise at the group she found in front of her. You realized that, like you, she would have no idea that it was Cove's mom who was hanging with you. However, after blinking at the woman a couple of times and looking between her and Cove, the realization seemed to strike on her. Hello there, I'm Pamela. I see you've met my kid, Eclair. I'm guessing you've already known Cove for a while. Kira laughed, and you and Cove exchanged looks at your parents' weird sense of humor. I'm Kira Priest, Cove's mom. It's so nice to meet you. A head of purple, brown hair caught your eyes. Ma popped up behind Mom, squeezing herself in beside her. We have company. I was wondering what all the commotion was. She grinned excitedly at Kira. The two of them introduced themselves and shook hands.
Hello.
Hi, Eclair, Cove. Cove smiled at Ma shyly, and she gestured a hand towards the living room. There's no use hanging around in the doorway. Why don't you come in? I'd love to, but I promised to take my son out to eat, and wouldn't want to hold you up with a surprise visit. Oh, I understand. You're welcome to stop by any time.
Of course.
I'll take you up on that offer when I can. Count on it. Would you mind too much if Eclair went with Cove and I? My treat. We won't be driving. Just a quick walk down the road. Sure, that sounds nice.
Have fun.
I hope you all have fun. You gave your moms a look, and they smiled at you fondly. You were happy they were letting you go. You could tell that Cove really needed the support, and you were ready to be there for him.
Marvelous.
Expect us back in an hour or two. We look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Your parents waved goodbye to the three of you as you backed up into the street. There was the sound of the front door closing behind you. I'm pretty positive I saw some restaurants when I was in the taxi, not too far from here. Yeah, it's a tourist town, isn't it? There's lots of them around. It was kind of strange to see Cove giving someone this much attitude. If he wasn't in the mood to be nice, he generally just kept to himself. Kira put her hands on her hips and smiled at her son. Well, you sound like the area expert. Do you have any recommendations for a place nearby? Not really. Kira pouted at him a little and turned to you instead. How about you, Eclair? Want to point me in the right direction? Sure. You nodded. You had been to a lot of places in town, so you knew a couple of good ones. There's a Chinese restaurant that me and my family go to all the time. It's my mom's favorite. There's also a tropical themed place that tries to be sort of fancy. Both sound like a treat. I'll leave it to you to pick for us, since Cove is going through a phase over there. He looked at her and turned his face away. Well, Chinese food sounds kind of good. Well, tropical themed place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Will you show us the way? You nodded, taking the lead of your little group as Cove and his mom followed behind you. Together, the three of you left the neighborhood behind. The walk was about 15 minutes. Along the way, Kira asked a lot of questions about the area. Cove was quiet most of the time, so you ended up answering her instead. Kira explained that she lived in a large city and she loved how peaceful and relaxing everything seemed in Sunset Bird. The restaurant was busy as usual, but luckily you were shown right to a small table. Kira lowered herself into the chair while Cove picked the one diagonal to her, not facing her or to her side. It was awkward. Let's see. To start, what would you like to drink? I'll get an orange soda.
Noted.
Noted. Claire? I like Kira's voice. Whoever did Kira's voice, also very good. Milk. Which type? Is there strawberry? Strawberry milk. Kira placed the order for your drinks, getting a black, hot coffee for herself, and it didn't take long before they were brought to the table and set in front of you. You took a long sip of your drink as you looked around the restaurant. Your small group checked over the menus, deciding what to order. The last time you came here, the dish you ordered was amazing. You wanted to order something different this time. Kyra and Cove didn't need any encouragement for this. They were totally focused on information in front of them. Soon the meals too were ordered and the menus taken away. You glanced at the table surface, waiting to figure out what to say. Cove sunk back further into his seat and avoided eye contact. He started to twiddle his thumbs while acting like all this was perfectly normal. His sour feelings today were unignorable. Instead of asking more open questions, he'd brushed off Kira, had mercy Kira had mercy on her son and instead put her focus towards you.
So?
Claire, what's the few things that you're into? There's gotta be something you do for fun, especially now that you're not buried in school assignments. Manga. I haven't heard of that style, but I'm sure it's very good. I'll bet you know about a lot of things then. And fiction. Me too. Nothing beats curling up with a good book. I hang out with people. Yeah, it's nice to have friends and family to spend time with. Music. Does she play? I listen to a lot of it. I have an MP3 player at home that my mom helped me put some music on, and I've seen some concerts. I might want to go to a concert these months. I still spend time studying. Studying in summer, I have to admit I don't know a lot of people who enjoy that, but hard work is the key to getting what you want in life. I like to watch TV. It's pretty addicting when you find a good series, isn't it? That it is. I think that's it.
Thanks.
I'm happy to learn more about you. There's so much I hadn't heard. Cove leaves the details out. So what exactly did Cove say about me? Kira laughed, holding a hand in front of her mouth. I can't tell you that. I didn't come all this way to embrace my son. Too much. Kids are delicate at this age. She laughed again, and you glanced at Cove to see his reaction. He was trying not to pay attention, but you could tell he was uncomfortable. Hoping it would clear some of the tension in the air, you decided to ask Kira a few questions of your own. Cove hadn't told you much about her, and you were curious to know more about this woman who was such a big part of his life. What exactly do you do for work? I'm a travel writer for magazines and things. I keep people in the loop on what's worth seeing. It's good work. Wow. What do you like to do? Spend time with my little boy, of course, and traveling. Real shock, huh? Where do you live normally? Nevada. Have you ever been there? You shook your head. It's a beautiful place. Check it out if you can. Are you in a new relationship now? Kyra brushed the question off lightly. Not at present. It didn't seem to bother her that the conversation dropped off. Cove sipped his soda angrily, slurping up the remaining drink with a furrowed brow. He looked ready to run straight out of the restaurant. You weren't sure if coming along had ended up making the lunch better or worse. You gave him a sympathetic look. Cove eventually noticed you watching him, and you gave him a look that let him know you were there for him. It took a couple of moments, but finally he cracked a smile, and that made you feel a little lighter inside. You two seem really cute together. Ah! Cove covered his face with his hands and leaned back in his seat.
Seriously?
Ah, Mom, why would you say that? You blushed. The way she said that had embraced you. You weren't prepared to have Cove's own mother describe the normal interactions the two of you had as cute. Your meals were delivered shortly after that, and everything was so delicious even Cove enjoyed his food.
Okay.
Alright. Now that we're all full and content, can you explain, please, why you've had a bug up your butt all day? Cove's face scrunched at that. Seriously, baby, what did Mom do to make you this mad? I haven't even been around a full day yet. He gripped the edge of the table, refusing to make eye contact. The words he spoke were barely audible over the din of the restaurant. You could have told me. She leaned forward to not miss anything else, eyebrows raised. Told you what? You finally seemed to find his voice and spoke the thoughts that had been on his mind. That I wasn't going to visit you this year, that you were going to be coming instead. Didn't you invite me? You wanted me to be here with you. Cove's eyes began to shake, and his frustration ebbed. I do want you to be around, but I didn't know it'd be like this. It's not the same, and nobody said anything.
I see.
The facial expression. Her expression grew tense. She threaded her fingers together and placed her hands in front of her on the table. We've both been gifted with another Clifford surprise. Referring to that as a Clifford surprise almost caused both you and Cove to crack a smile. You also had no idea his name wasn't just Cliff. Over 5 years, nobody had ever called him Clifford until now. She smoothed her hair out, not letting go her stern look. The more things change, the more they stay the same. They let out identical sighs, but smiled weakly at one another afterwards.
I'm sorry.
I can go home, Cove. We can still set up a normal trip to my place before the summer ends. Cove's lips tightly closed together. He seriously pondered the option. I think I do want you to stay. I miss it when you're not there. My heart. She reached across the gap, grabbing his face and planting a kiss on his cheek. Cove tried to wiggle away. Mom, stop! I'm sorry. Sweet young men need to be smooched by their parents. If I don't, they'll take away my mom license. I love her mischievous stare. Her mischievous stare. I like it. Kyra was completely unenthused by Cove's admission, though a tone of seriousness did return to her voice when the conversation continued. Do you want to talk to your dad, too?
No.
Cove had snapped the word instantly, but reeled his annoyance back in just as quickly. Maybe later. Not today.
It's all right.
I understand. We can shelve it. Thanks, Mom. Thank you for talking to me, little mister. She grinned affectionately at him before turning your way. And thank you, Eclair. Huh? What did I do? It's easy to act like a baby with your mom. It's harder to keep that up with your neighbor watching everything. Especially when you really care about what said neighbor thinks of you. She winks. Mom! She just ruffled his hair with a laugh, then moved her hand down to tap the end of his nose. And that was how the issue was resolved, at least between Cove and his mom. When the three of you left the restaurant and Kira had paid the bill, you walked back to your neighborhood slowly. You had eaten so much by that time you were beginning to feel sleepy. It didn't help that the lunch had happened late and the sun was already beginning to descend from the sky. Wow, that really is a late lunch. Like, really late lunch. But eventually you reached your street. Someone was there to greet your group upon arrival. Welcome back, family, and Eclair, too.
Huh.
Cliff. Dad. The two walked past him into the condo without sparing another word. Despite the summer heat, their shoulders were cold. Uh-oh. I'm in trouble. He rubbed the back of his neck with a crooked smile, but his eyes were soft as he left on after them. He's so much like his mom, don't you think? He gave a vague nod, not sure what he was expecting you to do. He nodded back, far more energetically. Okay, have a nice night, Eclair. You too, Mr. Holden. With that, Cove's dad disappeared to join the others inside. It was your turn to go home now. Summer hadn't started off at all how you imagined it would have, though it turned out to set the tone well. Having Kyra in the neighborhood was a new experience for not only you and Cove, but also both your families, and a dull moment was rarely had. Oh, alright. So our first moment to go through is road trip. Here we go. Even though you were awake, the sun had barely peeked its head above the horizon, and the sky above was still dark, though lightening by the minute. Usually you wouldn't be up so early, especially during summer vacation, but today was different. Today, instead of the lazy days you were used to, everything around you was a flurry of activity as both your family and Coves prepared for what lay ahead. Because parked in the street just outside your house was a massive RV camper, so big you couldn't even see Cove's house behind it. His parents had rented the RV for a few days to take him on a short road trip to see Redwood National Park. He glanced at Cove, who was standing nearby taking in the scene in front of him. The prospect of the road trip had to be a mixed bag for him, but it was only 3 days, so it seemed he was dealing with the best he could, especially now that you and your family were joining them. You weren't sure how exactly it had happened. You knew your parents and Cove spoke to each other often, and somehow along the way, plans were made after Cliff offered to share the space. The parents all thought it was a fantastic idea. You had already gotten a good look inside while helping to load everything in, and you had to admit that while it was a really big car, fitting that many people inside was going to be snug.
Let's go.
Move it or lose it, kiddo. Mom bustled past with a cooler in one hand and a large bottle of water under the other. She was upbeat for this early in the morning. Ma, however, seemed to be on the other side of the wavelength. She followed behind her wife, dragging her feet on every step. I'm going to need a whole jug of coffee once we hit the road. You felt like you were in the middle ground between the two. You just tried to keep up and took in some deep breaths. The air was still a little damp from dew, but you didn't mind it. And then at the end of the chain came your sister. She had a bone to pick before the trip officially started. Her rattling off critiques added some level of normalcy to everything new going on. I don't get why I can't sleep in the bed tonight. Eclair's the youngest, and I'll never fall asleep in that loft. We're trying to make things fair on everyone. If you want to play the older card, you should be offering to take the loft both nights. It's important for big siblings to make sacrifices for their younger ones. Elizabeth huffed, not happy with that answer in the slightest, and folded her arms, leaning back against the side of the RV. The trip plans had been nailed down prior, the sleeping arrangements included. Elizabeth still held on to her objections with them. There was a main area of the RV with a couch, loft, and some floor space. At the end of the car was a room with a large bed. Your moms were sharing the bed. Kira was on the couch, and father and son intended to sleep on the floor. The adults determined you and Elizabeth would switch between the small loft above the driver's seat and sharing the bed with moms. You thought it was unfair that Cove had to sleep on the floor. After all, it was supposed to be a trip for him and his family before yours ended up coming along too. Now he'd been kicked out of every bed, like space, and put on the floor. There had to be another way to organize things, so it was better for him. You offered to sleep somewhere else. I could sleep on the floor or wherever for one night, so Cove could have the turn on the loft instead. You announced your idea to the group, and everyone paused from what they were doing to consider it. Cove was taken back by the consideration, like he hadn't thought about how he had clearly gotten the short end of the stick.
No.
There's no way you'd be sleeping on the back while I'm with moms. There's barely enough room for 3. We can't add a 4th. Then I can be on the floor for a night, and he'll be on the floor for one night when Elizabeth is in the loft.
Sorry.
No can do, Eclair. Sorry. The 3 of us all together down there is bonding time. Cliff put one arm around Kira's shoulders and the other around Cove, dragging them both into him. They smiled at his little show. I'm afraid we can't extend you an invite. You simply have to take the loft. Cove and his mom both shook their heads at Mr. Holden, and you had to agree that it was a pretty weak excuse as far as excuses go. They were just being hospitable to your families.
Don't worry about it.
Thanks, Eclair. It's all right. I can take the floor for 2 nights. And that settled the matter for good. All right, you lot. Does everyone have everything they need? We're heading out in 5 minutes. Now's the time to double check. You don't want to forget something important. At the word, Elizabeth yelped and dashed back into the house, her bedhead hair bouncing behind her as she went. Ma came over and gave you a smile, setting her hands on her hips. How about you, Claire? Do you have all your clothes packed? Toiletries, deodorant, floss, anything else you can think of? You weren't sure about that. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I can't remember what. Ma chuckled and gave you a squeeze in the shoulder. I get like that on trips too, so I've learned to pack extra in case I, or anyone else, forgets. With the amount of supplies we've stuffed into the RV, I think we'll be okay. It's only a few days after all. Thanks, Ma. With a few minutes left to spare before leaving, you mentally went over what you had packed for your trip. Clothes, pillow and blanket, usual day-to-day gear for most people. You also had more personal things, such as you had to be prepared in case you saw something to sketch at the park, or if you had to write anything down, or if you needed to pass time just doodling. Your camera. It was just a little pocket camera you had gotten from your mom's, but you couldn't miss the opportunity to take some new snaps. A couple of things to read. You had packed one of your old favorites and a new one you'd never tried before. You knew you'd have plenty of time for them both on such a long drive. And that was everything. Hey, let me take that for you, Claire. I'll stow it in the RV. Wow, I can't word. I'll stow it in the RV. There's a few spots left. It'll fit. You let cannot read. You let Kira take your bag and gave you a grateful smile. With nothing left to do, you watched the others getting ready for the trip. Kira and Cliff seemed to have the most energy of anyone. They were finished packing the suitcases away while your moms had gone to lock up the house. They high-fived whenever another one got crammed into the storage compartments of the vehicle. Even though your own parents were more low-key than Cove's, you could tell they were both excited for the trip. It'd been a while since your family had been away anywhere together. Elizabeth skipped towards the RV, a bag slung over her shoulder, and you were surprised to see she seemed more optimistic about the whole ordeal now. Usually she wasn't one to exit the confines of her room unless it was for TV or food or to leave her family behind to be with friends. You would have thought 3 whole days packed in an RV with 6 others would be too much for her, but it was a nice surprise. You supposed any vacation was better than no vacation in her mind. Cove had been pretty quiet so far, and more than anything seemed to be overwhelmed by the situation. You were eager to get to the destination. You'd been looking at the park online and couldn't wait to explore everything it had to offer. Soon, the miscellaneous remaining tasks had all been wrapped up. Everyone piled into the RV. It was officially time for the trip to start. And it did. Cliff took the first shift driving. He cautiously navigated the massive car out of the narrow neighborhood streets. It was touch and go for the first part of the journey. Your moms and Kira were all huddled at the front trying to get a view of how much space they had on each side. There was a sense of relief when the first long leg of the trip was hit, and the RV would only need to go down one stretch of highway for miles. The mom group cleared out of the driver's area, leaving Cove's dad to it, taking more comfortable seats around the main cabin. You felt like you could finally relax now, too. Time slipped by as morning faded away. Before you realized it, the engine of the RV came to a stop, but only halted for a few moments as Cliff climbed out from the driver's seat and Mom took over. Ma was sitting shotgun, giving Mom a quick tutorial on the controls, as it was her first time driving anything this large. Cliff groaned as he headed towards the rest of you, stretching his arms above his head and loosening up his muscles. We're making good progress. Yeah, maybe you should take a nap in the back for a while. That was a long haul you just did, and I know you're on less sleep than usual. Cliff waved his hand, that trademark grin of his slipping into place. I don't need sleep. I've still got a few miles in the old tank. He flexed an arm, showing off his muscles to drive the point about how resilient he was home, and Kira rolled her eyes in amusement. Dad, everybody has to sleep. Cove shook his head at the tough guy act, though Cliff simply chuckled and ruffled his son's hair.
So?
Are you going to be driving again anytime soon, Mr. Holden? I want to know so I can prepare. Did anyone pack some rope? I might need it. There's no seatbelts up here. Elizabeth called down from where she was lounging in the loft above the driving compartment. She was laying on her back, her hair falling over the side and swinging around as the RV started up again and took off down the road. A bag of potato chips was balanced on Elizabeth's stomach, and she tossed a couple in her mouth right as Cliff held a hand to his chest, pretending to be offended by the remark. Kira laughed lightheartedly.
Don't worry.
Lucky for all of us, we have enough adults to cover the shifts today. We won't be driving again until tomorrow. It's not his driving I'm worried about. Let's not forget how many times Mom has put a dent in our car. It was only twice, and neither of those times was my fault, thank you very much. Mom then shouted back in her seat to join in the conversation, a playful smile tilting her lips. What I'm more worried about is this old monster getting us there and back again before falling apart. It looks as though it was built in the early 90s. 90s. 90s? Oh gosh. It must be older than some of the occupants. That's just the aesthetic of the decor. It's not that old, I think. Did you ask what year the model was before you rented it? Karen wrinkled her nose and thought. Yes, I did. I just can't remember what the answer was. Cliff chuckled at her, while the rest of you let out a collective sigh. I think a lot of the interactions between the different characters are very well written. I like them. They make me chuckle, and honestly, some of that banter totally feels like something that my family would have, so I love it. The RV lurched a little as it picked up speed, and you held onto the ladder to the loft to keep your balance. You felt something graze the top of your head before a weight settled on your beige hair. When you tilted your chin up carefully to look, you heard the rustling of the bag of chips and realized Elizabeth had rested the end of it on your head. She gestured to the opening, silently offering to share her snack. You took a handful. Reaching up, you scooped up some chips. After that, the weight of the packet left your scalp. You happily munched away as the conversation continued on, and you got closer and closer to your destination. The day flew by, with the group of you chatting, playing games, and passing the time together before finally arriving at the park and setting up for the night. Ma was closing the windows while everyone got ready for bed, saying good night to the others as she made her way to the back room. You had all had dinner together while still driving, and some hours after had arrived at your destination and found a spot to park in for the rest of your stay. Giving a look across the front of the RV, you noticed almost everyone there was already dozing off where they were, with Cove having completely fallen asleep curled up in the passenger seat. He must have done so while Kira was driving the last leg, and they had decided not to disturb him. Kira herself was the only one up there who was still awake, flipping through a magazine next to a portable light from her spot on the couch. It seemed Mr. Holden needed to sleep despite his claims. You followed your moms into the back room and closed the door behind you before crawling into bed between them. It was a queen-size bed, so there was enough space for the three of you together without too much squishing. Get good rest, Declare. We've got a big day ahead of us tomorrow.
It's fantastic.
I'm looking forward to the bush walk in the morning. It's been a long time since I was out in nature like this. There will be plenty for us to see. You stayed awake for a little while longer while your moms whispered about the park and the forest in general. With the sound of their voices in the background, eventually you nodded off to sleep. The next morning you were up bright and early, preparing for the day ahead. You had an okay sleep. It was nothing compared to your bed at home, but at least you didn't have to sleep on the floor, so you couldn't complain too much. Ma whined a bit about the firmness of the mattress, but Mom had only encouraged her to enjoy the trip while she could. While looking for a spot to get ready, you had some trouble finding space of your own as the others were doing the same thing. Cove was perched on top of the counter, brushing his hair and tucking up his legs every time someone wanted to move past. I can only imagine the chaos. The parents were checking, double-checking, and triple-checking that you had everything, to the point where you had stopped listening to them altogether. You knew you wouldn't be returning to the RV at all that day, but by the look of the backpacks that were packed up and ready to go, you doubted anything was missing from them. It didn't take much longer until you all exited the RV in a bustle and headed up to the Redwood National Park. Definitely something I want to visit someday. Wow. Cove had his head tilted up towards the canopy of trees, his eyes wide as he took in the massive chunks on either side of you. You knew that the redwood trees were here considered the tallest trees on Earth, but you weren't prepared for exactly how huge they would be in person.
Come on.
Smile, you two! You spun just in time for Kira to snap a picture of you and Cove together before she pointed her camera at Cliff, trying to get a shot despite his weak protest that she should just enjoy the moment. Your parents were walking behind the group a little, with Mom telling Ma some information she had read about the park on a brochure. Ma listened happily while looking around and taking in the sights, every now and then asking a question or making a joke about something Mom had said. You smiled at them, thinking your mom must have read a lot of pamphlets to know so much about the park. Maybe you should come and work here as a tour guide, if you know so much about the place. Elizabeth teased, earning a squeeze in the nose from your mom. She seemed to be enjoying herself, but you thought that might just be because she was amused by everyone else's reaction. Surrounding you either side, the enormous trees shot up into the sky. The sunlight peeked through their canopy and speckled the path in front of you. The sheer size of the redwoods made you feel like a teeny ant bustling along through the forest. The adults had decided on some casual nature walks rather than any serious hiking, and you strolled along at your own pace, taking in the scenery. Elizabeth sped up a little, smirking at Cove as she fell into place between the two of you, and immediately you could tell by her expression she was going to say something taunting. I can't believe our families are actually on vacation together. She threw her arms out, speaking with a genuine sense of bewilderment. I would have joked about something like this happening, but now I'm not sure I want to give them any more ideas. Cove spared her a look but said nothing, and instead continued walking along. Just watch. Next year, they'll be talking about their next new amazing idea. She put on a fake voice, deeper than her own. We should just sell both our houses and move in together. Think of how much we'd save on the mortgage. It was clear that Elizabeth was being sarcastic. Cove simply shook his head, not really bothered by her. You supposed he was used to it by this point. But seriously, they really do act like we're a single family, just because we live across the street from each other. Elizabeth gave you and Cove a look, her eyes glinting with mischief as she leered at you.
Yeah?
Maybe one day we will be related. Legally, anyway. She said it as though she was a gossipy old lady. Maybe. I guess you and me could get married, Elizabeth. I love this. Maybe. I guess you and me could get married, Elizabeth.
What?
What? Me? Yeah, that way Claire would be my sister-in-law. That would be fun. Elizabeth struck her tongue out of Cove, as if the very idea were ridiculous. Oh. Cove has a point. It wasn't a great comment. Oh, I found you. Oh, we must strengthen the houses. You were embraced. Why did she always have to say things like that? It wasn't fun, and she knew it. After no further replies, your sister walked ahead, and you and Cove swapped uncomfortable looks. The day continued on, with plenty to see and experience. You passed a few different activities that you would have liked to try out if you had the time, such as kayaking and rock climbing, but Ma said that would have to wait for another trip. There was a little stream during the walk that you sat beside and set out a picnic for lunch, nibbling on a selection of fruits, sandwiches, and chips. Various birds flew by overhead, and you made a game out of gassing the species that were hanging out in the trees nearby. You even managed to get a couple of them right, including the kingfisher that grabbed half of Cliff's sandwich. Poor Cliff. Who wouldn't have a good time on this trip? You were disappointed to only have one day at this trip. There was so much here, and you felt like you needed a whole week, maybe even more, to experience it all. You sighed quietly to yourself, wondering if you'd get the chance to come back. Your group made it back to camp, just as the sun was settling in the sky, and the stars were appearing one by one. Everyone had enjoyed different parts of it most. You traded stories of what you thought while you were eating dinner, then afterwards you pitched in to help clean up. You, along with Elizabeth and Cove, got to head back to the RV early and spend some time together while the parents stayed outside longer. It was nice to have the space to yourselves after the cramped journey there, and while Elizabeth had locked herself in the back room with her headphones, you and Cove were left in the main lounge area. You hung out with Cove. I guess we should figure out something to do? You took a seat on the sofa while Cove sat down on the other end, tapping his fingers against his knee. You know, I hardly ever see you wearing a jacket, especially in summer. Oh yeah, I like wearing as few layers as possible. It's easier that way. I'd rather be cold than extra hot, and it's kind of a pain to carry extra clothes around. My parents made me bring this jacket. I don't mind either way. I just dress depending on the weather, or how I'm feeling at the time. Cove smiled lightly and nodded. I've noticed. That conversation had run its course. Instead, you asked Cove about what else he would have liked to do in the park if he had more time here. The two of you ended up chatting about various outdoor activities available. Kayaking, rock climbing, hiking, horseback riding, ooh, wildlife walks. There are so many things to potentially choose from. You made an agreement that if one of you ever had the chance to come back, you'd bring the other two. That way, you could try it all together again. Well, the parents all arrived soon after, each of them climbing into the RV and finding some place to sit down and rest their legs. Elizabeth, having heard the commotion, came out from the room for the first time since arriving and joined you all. You spent the evening chatting and playing a few games, enjoying the last evening of the trip together. Bedtime arrived within the blink of an eye. As the group hunkered down for the night, your mom did a final round to be sure nothing had been left behind. She explained that Cliff was going to start driving early in the morning, like on the first day, but would be letting everyone else in the group sleep. There wouldn't be any need for all of them to get up. Now was the time to check you hadn't left anything outside. You, as well as everyone else, were confident you had it all packed up inside the RV, which meant it was time to get some rest before the journey home tomorrow. Your moms and Elizabeth said goodnight, heading to the back room while you climbed up to the loft. Cove and his family got situated below in the previously set arrangement. You tried to get comfortable as a million thoughts were running through your mind. It was hard to believe that the trip was practically over, and before you knew it, you'd be back on your own bed at home. Enjoy this mini adventure. It was short, that was for sure, but you got to see and do so much during your time here. All in all, it was a nice break away from home. The minutes ticked by silently. It didn't take long for soft snores of Cliff and Kira to drift up to you. They were asleep now. You wondered if Cove was still awake and decided to poke your head out from the loft to find out. You blinked through the dark. Looking down the hall, you noticed Cove laying on his back, his eyes staring straight at the ceiling. His seafoam hair was spread out in his sleeping bag. He must have felt you watching him because suddenly his eyes locked on yours. It was difficult to see much in the dim light, but you could make out the crooked smile on his face well enough. You grinned back at him. Cove shrugged in his bed while still smiling, or at least you thought he did. You then decided to have fun quietly. I guess I'm not driving in the morning. You buried yourself under the blanket and pulled out your pencils as silently as possible. While hidden away in your own little spot, you spent your not sure how long getting some extra time to enjoy yourself. But at some point your eyes grew heavy and you gently drifted off into deep sleep. When you woke up the next morning, it was to the rumble of the RV as it traveled the long journey home. Still blinking sleepily, you peeked over the edge of the loft to get a glimpse at what was happening. Cove was sitting with his mom on the couch, the two of them talking quietly. He must have noticed you moving around up there because Cove's ocean blue eyes snapped to yours, and he gave you a smile. Morning, Claire. Good morning, Cove. Soon your moms and Elizabeth emerged from their room, dressed and ready for the day of travel. You spent most of the day hanging out together in the RV, savoring the last few hours of vacation. Kira suggested a few different travel games she used to play with Cove when he was younger, and you all had a great time competing against each other. When the RV finally pulled into your street, it was well into the night, and you were looking forward to crawling into your own bed after the last few days away. Everyone else must have been feeling the same because it was mutually agreed that unpacking and cleaning the RV would wait until the morning. Once home again, you went straight up to your room and dropped into your bed, shoes and all. You were happy to be in your own bed. You stretched out with a smile on your face, enjoying having the space all to yourself. With those last few thoughts drifting through your mind, it wasn't long before you dozed off to sleep. Tomorrow, life would go on like normal. All right.